The Ran goes through all the different steps, so it's much more confusing. Okay. Before we start, I want to mention that today's broadcast is sponsored by the Zolti family, the Il Nishmas of Moshe ben Chaim, who is the Nasi of our Besmedrish, who took care of everybody, and he should continue to be a male Yosher on his family, on his Besmedrish, and all of Klal Yisrael. That we're on the topic of princes, it's also the yard side of Rabbeinu HaKadosh today. And Rabbeinu HaKadosh, we learned all about the day of his Ptira at the end of Masechtos Tshuvos. We learned that he had a terrible upset stomach, and we learned that there was a tug of war between the Elyonim and the Tachtonim. And when I say Elyonim, I mean the Malachim. I don't say Tachtonim, I mean people down here in this world. And when his Meshorsis saw how much he was suffering, putting on his film, taking off his film, she said, better I should daven that he should be relieved of his pain. And what she did was, the Gemara asked, how could she possibly override the tefillos of everybody else? So she dropped a jug off the roof, and it made such a loud bang that everybody was startled for a minute. And at that point, the Malach HaMavis was able to seize the neshama of Rebbe. And if you remember, the Gemara said there that a Baskel came out and said, whoever was there but a Ptir of Rebbe, whoever attends the Levaya, will have a chelik in Olam Haba. And we learned about that Koivis who was there at the time, who was there with Rebbe every day, and that one day he wasn't there, and he ended up jumping off a roof. And there's a whole shayla on the Gemara: did he jump off the roof, or was he very distraught that he missed the Levaya? Because of that, he fell off the roof. There was a shayla about that, and that Koivis came to play in our Gemara a couple of days ago, because he was the one who was able to repeat back to Rebbe the halachos that Rebbe taught that Rebbe had forgotten. And then we learned that Rebbe used to come back every Friday night dressed in the Shabbos finest to make Havdalah, until he got wind of the fact that the neighbors were talking about it, and he felt that people would say that other people, tzaddikim who were nifter, are chopped liver because they don't make it back. So he stopped coming. So that was the Yosy Rebbe. So it was the Neshama Shavi, Melech Yosher. For all of us, we learned his Mishnayos. He was the one who sort of made Torah Shabbat Peh into Torah Shabbat Ksav by finalizing and formalizing the Mishnayos to make sure that we won't lose the vital information that we need to continue on Yiddishkeit. Okay, and part of what we want to discuss from Rebbe's work was the halacha that Rabbi Yosy said that making something hefker doesn't help to be able to give it to somebody who was not allowed to have anah from you. Because back in the Mishnah on Daf Mem Beis Amud Beis, on Daf Mem Gimel Amud Aleph, the Gemara discusses if you're walking with somebody who's not allowed to have anah from you, and you're in the desert, and he's starving to death, and you have plenty of provisions, the halacha is you could just put a piece of cake down on a rock and say it's hefker, and then he could take it. And we look at it like he's not taking it from you, rather he's being zoiche in it from hefker. Rabbi Yosy didn't allow it. And we had two pshatim in Rabbi Yosy. The first pshat was the pshat that Rabbi Yochanan suggested, and that was that Rabbi Yosy holds hefker, when you make something hefker, it does not take it out of your rishos. It puts it into a state that anybody can come and take it from your rishos, but it's in your rishos. Which means when that someone takes it out of your rishos, when that someone is zoich and hefker, he's taking it from you. If that's the case, you would not be able to give something or be mad for something so that someone who may not have enough from you should come take it, because he's taking it from you, and therefore it wouldn't work. However, the Gemara slugged up that svara because we had a raya from Brises. The Brises said that if you were mafker it before you made him the Isra no, then the hefker does work. If you learn that the hefker remains with the person who was mafker until the person takes it away, well, then what's the difference? Even if I was mafker before I made another, it's still mine. And if it's still mine, he can't take it. So because of that, the Gemara said that the pshat that Rabbi Yochanan offered and Rabbi Yosy cannot be the truth. And Rabbi Yosy must hold that hefker is like the Rabban holds hefker. Hefker means it's immediately out of your rishos. And no matter what, technically, the person who's not allowed to have enough from you can take something that you were mafker because he's not directly taking it from you. So why didn't Rabbi Yosy allow us to use this loophole of hefker? That's because people can abuse it. like the story of Matnas Beis Chayron, where somebody only made it hefker for the purposes of circumventing the nether, and that wasn't really a sincere hefker, and in fact, that person was over there shadol. Right? That's the Gemara.
Yeah, I'm wondering the same thing. Does it say
Who
the
said about the case of Pikuch Nefesh? It doesn't mean he's going to die. He could wait a couple of days till the guy's about to chalash avek and die. Then he can give him a mashu. You know, it's like the Yid. It's like the Yid who was bariming zich that this year I was makayim the mitzvah of matanos lavyonim b'mahedrin v'nahedrin. I found a Yid who hadn't eaten in weeks, and he was about to chalash avek, and I gave him a pruta. So the guy's listening to a story, is crying. Tell me who he is. I want to give him money. So I said, "Chaz Hashem, give him this geld. Ich darf him hopen next to you know, right?" So mainly, if it's Pikuch Nefesh, you'll give him. Okay.
Chaim wants to make a collection for them.
Okay. Okay, we're gonna put it so that everyone can see you. Okay, gewaltig. So now the Gemara said, let's make believe that Rabbi Yochanan wasn't Augushlagen. Let's entertain this possibility that maybe Hefker doesn't automatically remove it from my rishus. Let's say the Hefker remains in my rishus until someone else comes and takes it away. That'll have a huge ramification, because we know if you're mafker something and then you're coined back from the Hefker, technically you shouldn't be chayv in ma'asus anymore, because once something becomes Hefker, you're not muchayv in ma'asus. According to Rabbi Yosy, that trick would never work, because when you're mafker, it never left your rishus, right? So we have a brisa that says as follows. The brisa says, "Hamafker esadeyu," and this is on Mem Gibel Lamed Beis. Hamafker esadeyu. Somebody was mafker his field. Now I falsely touched this yesterday. I don't know if it's this year, but in the second year, that it means you're mafker the parish of your field. Because once the parish of your field are hefker, you're patami meiser. But that's not what the words of the brisa say. The brisa of mafker shadeyu. It had the same impact. If my sada was hefker and then I harvested from the sada, so weiter it would have patted from meiser. So if at any point after these things are fully grown, I assume after they're fully grown, that they're hefker, so then they're patted from meiser. So this fellow was mafker his field. The reason why I'm stressing that it has to mamish the field is because on today's daf, one of the Rishonim mentioned that this is only relevant to karka, not metaltalin, and we'll see that later. But I just want to be accurate. So a mafker esadeyu, someone was mafker's field. Kol shloish yomim, for 3 days yochalachseboy mikan velech ein yochalachseboy. So right off the bat, this doesn't stem with our sheet of Rabbi Yosy, because it says after 3 days you can no longer be chayzer. Why can't I be chayzer? Why can after 3 days I cannot be? Why can't I be chayzer? According to Rabbi Yosy, you can be chayzer forever. According to Rabbi Yosy, hefker means it's still in my rishus till someone else takes it away, so I can always be chayzer. So right away, this doesn't stem with Rabbi Yosy.
What does the word chayzer mean?
I could change my mind and say I don't want it to be hefker anymore. It doesn't mean I'm coining it from hefker. It means I don't want it to be hefker anymore.
Why after 3 days can I still do it to somebody?
So that's a different question. But according to Rabbi Yosy, we know for sure that I could be chayzer forever. This brisa says after 3 days it cannot be chayzer. So that doesn't come with Rabbi Yosy. Right? Make sense so far? Why there's this 3 day delay? Why for 3 days? Can I be chayzer? So we're not going to Rabbi Yosy, because according to Rabbi Yosy, you can be chayzer forever. We're going to Rabbanon that when your mafker is out of your shus, you cannot be chayzer immediately. So why is there a 3 day delay? So we explained, the Gemara explained later, that according to the Rabbanon, even though Ba'etim is totally out of your shus, and therefore, if you took it back, you would be potter from Meiser, we delayed that for 3 days so that people shouldn't make harama, people shouldn't be mafker their fields just for the purpose of avoiding Meiser. So therefore, we made a delay of 3 days. Why does 3 days help? Because 3 days, I'm not going to leave my karka in a matzah of hefker for 3 days. So therefore, we know that we've eliminated this loophole that people would exploit. Now, if they're making a gzeira that for 3 days it's not hefker, they're making that gzeira it's not hefker for me, and it's not hefker for anybody else either. It's completely not hefker. Because if not, then it looks like a joke, right? And then no one's going to take the chum seriously. For you, it's not hefker, but for Yenna, it is hefker. So obviously, even if somebody else takes it from me, the Rabbanan say it's not hefker. I can get it back. So that was the basic understanding of how we started to understand this Mishnah. And then the Seifa of this very same Mishnah says something that seems only to work with Rabbi Yossi. Because the Seifa of the Brisa says, Omer tei zadazum of curse l'yom echad l'shabbat l'yom echad l'shabbat echad l'chodesh echad l'shon echad l'shvu echad. So the Brisa introduced a new concept. Hefker that only applies temporarily. Hektish for a week. Hektish for a day. There, it's all dependent upon, did someone come, did either you or somebody else come and took it from the hefker, which means it's totally in. It's which means the hefker is revocable until the point that someone is coming from the hefker. That's exactly Rabbi Yossi Shita. According to Rabbanan, it's hefker even if nobody came to took it, because hefker pushes it out of Marishus right away. So at first glance, the Gemara suggested that the Reisha is not consistent with Rabbi Yossi, because after 3 days, hefker becomes irrevocable, and the Seifa stems with Rabbi Yossi, because the hefker never becomes irrevocable until someone takes it away from the hefker.
But didn't you say before that you could always,
That's correct. That's exactly what I said.
Even after somebody, this one's always.
No, until someone takes it. Because what hefker means is it's permission for anyone to come and take it. But let me explain something to you. Let me explain something to you. It's happy you're bringing that up. Let's say, according to Rabbi Yossi, I make it hefker, and a week later you come and take it. I could say I was choshev the day before you took it. So once I admit that I was choshev after you took it, sure it doesn't work. But I could tana that I was choshev before you took it. So now you want to know how choshev mishpat? Who do you believe? I don't know. I'm talking about technically. We're not going about how you believe. Okay. So the Gemara said at first glance the Reisha does not correspond with Rabbi Yossi, and the Seifa is Rabbi Yossi because the hefker is not planted, it's not irrevocable until someone comes and takes it.
1 second. And Lord Rabuna, I can't be choice because the second I was not
It's not yours anymore.
I could re-coin it, but I can't.
If you're coining it, you're like anybody else being coined it. And in fact, if you would, you'd be potter from Meisers because you were coined it from hefker, just like anybody else would have been coined it from hefker. According to Rabbi Yossi, if you take it, according to Rabbi Yossi, if you're mafker something, you can actually take it in 2 different ways. You could just be chazer the hefker, and then you'll be chayiv in Meiser because it was never hefker. But you could also say, why am I worse than anybody else? I'm not being chayiv from the hefker. I'm being coined from the hefker. So you can actually split yourself in half, and you can say, no, I'm being coined from the hefker. So according to Rabbi Yossi, if you clarify what I'm doing here is not reversing, if I stop take it back, the assumption is that I'm chayiv from the hefker. Because why would someone go like this, right? But if I speak out the fetish, what I'm doing here is I'm not being chayiv from the hefker. I'm maintaining my hefker, but I want to be coined it from the hefker like anybody else. Then even according to Rabbi Yossi, you would be part of the match.
That's why they made the
You're jumping ahead. I don't want to jump in. We're building the block slowly. So now we're at the point where the Reisha does not stem with Rabbi Yossi, and the Seifa does not stem with the Rabbanan. So the Gemara said, Reisha, Rabbanan, V'Seifa, Rabbi Yossi. So now we have 2 attempts to make the Brisa follow the opinion of one Tana. So the first shot was to make the Brisa follow exclusively the Rabbanan. So the Reisha is very simple, how it fits in with the Rabbanan, because in fact, after 3 days, which is the Takana period, right, the Chachamim made a time delay on your hefker. After that 3-day period, hefker is irrevocable. That's exactly the Rabbanan Shita. There's no problem with that. But how in the world is the Rabbanan going to explain that in a case where you made a temporary hefker, the hefker won't be chal until someone takes it away? How could you possibly explain that according to the Rabbanan? So what did Ula say? Ula said very simply, when do the Rabbanan argue on Rabbi Yossi and say hefker immediately takes it out of your rishos? That's by a regular hefker, where I'm being mafker, meaning I'm completely cutting myself off from it. But here this fellow said, I'm not cutting myself off of this chayfetz forever. For a week I want to be hefker, for a day, for a month. Such a hefker is a yenda hefker. It's a power of a hefker. That shows that I never wanted to cut myself off. So such a hefker operates exactly how every hefker operates according to Rabbi Yossi. Such a hefker, even the Rabbanan agree, the way it works is it remains mine, but anybody has permission to come and take it. So that's very, very simple. So that's a very, very good point. So the Ram actually massages that. The Ram actually is bothered by exactly that, because lo shchichi is the wrong word. What it really means is that's not my intention, right? So the Ram actually is bothered by that. I'm not saying the Ram gives a teretz that you like, but the mere fact that the Ram was bothered by it calms me down. At least I know that I'm only concerned that maybe since the word lo shchichi doesn't make sense, maybe we have wrong shot. But once the Ram says I have the same problem, if I have wrong shot together with the Ram, we're okay. We're going to be okay. So let's see what he says over here, where it says lo shchichi. He says, I think it's up a little bit further over here. Okay, so when we look here is in the it's over here. 1 second. I'll find out where the Ran says that. Let me see. Over here it is. So I'm looking about 6 or 7 lines up at the bottom. The Yochel from the shiny Shavu of a Shabbos to Lo Shchicham. So right away the Ran says Kloimar. What does Lo Shchicham mean? You're just the word Kloimar shows already the Ran's trying to massage. The Lo Shchiach the Mafkari Inshi B'Chagab. This is not a normal hefker. It's a weird hefker. The Kivan Shishina Zeh. Since this person didn't make a typical hefker, Amdinan Ledaite, we assess his brain, the Kivan Shalei Ratzalaf Kirai, hefker Oilam. He didn't just make it hefker, he says it for a week, for a day. Bakati Agid Gabe, he's still holding on to it. Then Afilu Bo'ez's man Chef Kirai, even in that period of time where he is willing to be mafkers for the day, for the week, for the year, still so when I put a time limit, I'm not only changing the kamos, the length of the hefker, I'm changing the eichos of the hefker. I'm changing the intensity of the hefker. I'm not really removing myself from it. So at least we know the Ran agrees with that. Okay, so now we understand how the Rabbanon fits perfectly into the Brisa. And just for information, that's going to be the Maskana, because Rabbi Yossi's shot that we had, that the hefker is not really a hefker, that's bottle. We already slugged it up. So this is the most important shot to understand in the Brisa, because this is the Maskana going to be the shot. Maskim? So we do have a remnant, even though Rabbi Yossi was overslugging, we have a remnant that remains of Rabbi Yossi. When you make a temporary hektish, there is such a weird type of hektish that it's only not hefker. There's this weird type of hefker that it remains by me until you take it when you make a hefker lizman. So we're not, although we're slugging up Rabbi Yossi or Rabbi Yochanan's pshat in Rabbi Yossi, we're slugging it up because all of hefker doesn't work that way, but there is still such a theory, such a type of hefker that does work that way when you make a temporary hefker. Is that clear? Okay, that's possible.
So when it's kind of not only the tzviyah, it's kind of also the fact.
Well, if he was not for the field, then he's been kind of the field. And now I understand more why someone wouldn't want it to go on for more than 3 days. Because with all his lumdus, I'm not comfortable that my field should be in my Titus may lose them, okay, I'll survive. But I don't want anybody staking claim to my field. So the Chazal know how to play with the guy's emotions, because he's not going to want to do this more than 3 days. And even for those 3 days, I'm sure he's standing watching the whole time. If anybody comes close, he's going to be chayzer right away. Okay, so that is the first sheet. Then Rish Lakish said maybe we could explain the whole brisa according to Rabbi Yossi. Now, to fit the whole brisa according to Rabbi Yossi requires a little bit more massaging than Ula was willing to do. But Rish Lakish was willing to massage it more to make it work. So let's analyze. What was the problem with Rabbi Yossi? The problem with Rabbi Yossi is Rabbi Yossi holds hefker never becomes irrevocable. But the problem is the ratio of our Mishnah says after 3 days, it does become irrevocable. So how does that shift? So that can't closure anymore. Zok Rabbi Yossi, we have a takana. Midairaisa, of course, hefker never becomes irrevocable. But they made a takana that after 3 days it should become irrevocable. Why? Because let's think about this. According to Rabbi Yossi, if I take it back, I'm a chayv meiser, right? According to Rabbi Yossi, if I don't say anything, if I take back my hefker, I have to give meiser midairaisa. But if Yener takes it, then Yener is part of a meiser, because he was calling it an hefker. That's how hefker works. Maskim, if I take it, I'm a chayv meiser. But if Yener takes it, it's chayv meiser. But Yener might think, hey, that doesn't make any sense. It must be that when I took it from him, it wasn't really hefker. It must be that when I took it from him, it's like he gave it to me for a present. In other words, Nama Oritz would perceive Rabbi Yosy's hefker as not really being hefker at all. Because, let's think about it. If you want, you could be chayzer at any time. I'm only able to take this because you weren't chayzer. If I take this field, it's only because you're not claiming that you were chayzer before I took it. So I know I'm completely at your mercy when I'm taking this field, and it's completely in your hands whether or not I can get this field, even after you were mafkir. That's called hefker. People don't recognize that as hefker. So I perceive it as if I'm getting it directly from you, which means I think it's chayv and meiser, midiraisa. I mistakenly think that because the optics seem that it's not hefker, because hefker to us means it's totally cut off from you, and then I come along and take it. But here it's not totally cut off from you. You could be chayzer at any minute, and if you yourself took it, you'd be mechuyev meiser. That's what it always was in the Chadami. But Nama Oretz, looking at this, looks at it from, if he takes it from hefker, he's chayv meiser. If I take it from hefker, I'm patur meiser. So misunderstand it. Yeah. You're a Talmud Chacham. They didn't make the exam for you. But could you hear that there could be somebody that didn't go to Philly that might think that this would be chayiv? Right. And you could have taken it back till the last second. You could, even after you were mafkir, till the last second, you could have taken it back.
Why do you think it's in the phone?
I'm sorry?
Why do you think?
Well, if it's not hefker, I'm getting it directly from you. He thinks I'm getting it directly from you. I'm not getting it through hefker domain. So that's, and the Ran describes that right at the top of Mem Dalet Amud Beis. We can actually see how the Ran describes that. The Amin al-Haqi also the Memar, the Chiloi Chazer Boy Nami, the Zacha Bayakar, when someone else is Zoich from the Hefker, Loy Mefker Zachi. He'll think wrongfully that he's not getting it from Hefker. Why? The Kivun de Makama de Liskabe, Hoyochel Mafker Lachserboy. I know that before I took it, at any second, the Mafker could have said a change of mind, and I couldn't take it anymore. So therefore, Alma should say Havakoi. From my perspective, you still have control over the chayvitz. Even though you were mafkir, you still have control over it because you can cancel your hefker at any time. I look at it like I'm getting a matana from you because since you could have canceled the hefker at any time and you didn't, and that's why I have it. That's a matana. So I'll think I'm chayiv. So what's the problem if I'm a chayiv meiser? Big deal. So I'll be mavish meisers. The problem is being that I'm not mechayiv meisers, and I think I'm mechayiv meisers. I might use this as meiser to pater something else that I have that really is tevel, and that won't work. That could lead to a disaster. So, in order that people should chap that hefker is hefker, we said after 3 days, we're making it real hefker. It's irrevocable. So even though we derive according to Rabbi Yosy, it's always revocable. You can always change your mind. We say no. After 3 days, can't change your mind anymore. This way, people will come. Oh, he can't change his mind. So I'm not getting it from hefker because even if he changes his mind, they'll take it anyway. Oh, now I understand this hefker. So that's what they did. So the question is, why do they wait 3 days? What about the first 3 days? First 3 days is the same thing. Zok to Gemara. The reason why the Rabbanan didn't activate your takana for 3 days is because we also want to make sure that we understand how Rabbi Yosy works with Daraisa. Why? Because of the Ramoyin. If we would say that it's fully hefker immediately, then you still have the same problem as the Rabbayin. Is that someone who's going to be a Ramai is going to be mafkir and then be kohen right back. So therefore, because of the Ramoyin, they decided to delay this takana. So in the Rabbanan, the whole takana was only for 3 days because of the Rabbayin. In Rabbi Yosy, you don't need the takana for the Ramoyin because the natural state of hefker eliminates that opportunity for a Ramai. But once the Rabbanan came and tinkered with it and said that Rabbi Yoshi's hefker is full hefker, they had to delay that and only make it full hefker after 3 days to avoid the Ramai. So does that make sense? So that's pretty clear. So now the brisa is pretty simple. The Reisha says that after 3 days it's irrevocable, even according to Rabbi Yosy, because the Rabbanan stepped in and made it irrevocable. So people should realize that this is really hefker and they're really part of a meiser. And the Sefer speaking, according to Rabbanan, it's beautiful. According to Rabbi Yosy, it's beautiful. Rabbi Yosy holds that it's always revocable. You're going to ask me, why don't you have the takana over here as well? Why don't you have the takana of after 3 days and make it irrevocable in the Sefer as well? right? In the Sefer, it says that until someone is koined, I can back out. Why doesn't the Takana have 3 days kicking? Right? Didn't they make a Takana after 3 days, even in Rabbi Yossi, it becomes a real hefker? So for that, the Ram told us they didn't need a Takana because it's not a typical hefker. Once the guy's making L'yoyim, we're not worried about that. We are only making the Takanas for what's typical. Okay.
I want to worry that it's really with the rights to the.
Oh, so now we have one more possibility of a problem, which is what Monty's bringing up. Let's analyze this. After 3 days, when according to Rabbi Yossi, if someone takes from my hefker, what is the halacha? The halacha is that he's taking it from hefker and he's potter, right? Because according to Rabbi Yossi, midaraisa, it's hefker and he's potter. But according to Rabbi Yossi, if someone else takes it from my hefker, midaraisa, he's potter and he doesn't have to give. But what if I took it myself back after 3 days? According to Rabbi Yossi, I'd be chayiv, right? According to Rabbi Yossi, if I myself after 3 days take it back, I should be chayiv in ma'asros because midaraisa, even though the Rabbanan say it's hefker gomer, but midaraisa, the Rabbi Yossi understands hefker is that it's still in my rishus, right? So according to Rabbi Yossi, if I'm after it and I wait 3, 4, 5 days, right, and now I take it back, midarabanan it's hefker gomer and I'm potter for ma'aser, but midaraisa I'm chayiv in ma'aser. So what is the halacha? Will the Rabbanan tell you that you're potter for ma'aser because the Rabbanan made it hefker, or will the Rabbanan be mechayiv in ma'aser? So the Ran says the Rabbanan is never going to make the konos to get you off of ma'aser. So even though technically when they're making it hefker through hefker based and hefker, you now are koined from hefker, but since the deraisa is that you're chayiv in ma'aser, they're not going to stop you. They're going to tell you to take ma'aser off. So the problem is if you're a mechuyev in ma'aser midaraisa, but you only think that you're chayiv midarabanan because really because the Rabbanan were mafker in Gansen, so now you have the same problem. You have ma'aser that's chayiv ma'aser deraisa, but you think it's only chayiv midarabanan. I'm sorry. So I think it's potter. I might think it's potter, but I'm really chayiv midaraisa, right? So frankly, that could be a major problem. If I think that it's potter, but it's really chayiv, there's a problem. So that was the last issue that we had, and therefore I wouldn't be able to use this to be matter any other tool. So right, so technically midaraisa I'm chayiv, but I think it's potter. So this is right. So the problem is if I think that I'm chayiv in ma'asros, right? I'm sorry, I think I'm potter in ma'asros because the Rabbanan said I'm potter, but the Rabbanan didn't really say I'm potter because the Rabbanan aren't pattering this. I am chayiv. I'm chayiv midaraisa. According to Rabbi Yossi, I'm chayiv midaraisa if I took it, but I might think that I'm potter because the Rabbanan made hefker. So what's going to happen is since I'm chayiv midaraisa, but I think I'm potter, so then what I'm going to do is either I won't be mafish shumash for this, or worse, the Rabbanan are saying that it's mamash hefker when I was kind of from hefker, so I might think that I'm only chayiv midarabanan. So therefore, I might use this to patra other things, and that's going to be a problem. So the Gemara answers, whenever the Rabbanan makes such a kana, if you were mafker it, you're only allowed to be mafish shumash on it minei. And let's look at that last tickle inside, and then we'll go back there. So the last tickle inside is upachinin aval deraisa lo have a hefker the dilma also lasuri ben achiv al Torah. So what is the problem? Amikan ve'elach ein yochalach sabetpor. After 3 days, the Rabbanan made a takana according to Rabbi Yossi and said that even though hefker according to Rabbi Yossi allows the mafker to back out of it forever, the Rabbanan says after 3 days you cannot back out. The Ka'amar, what did the Rabbanan say? Dinahida Medina, Rabbi Yossi, Yochel Lachshabai. Even though my Ikra Din, Rabbi Yossi, the way hefker works is, I can always be chayzer. V'loy have a hefker, and it's not hefker because I could change my mind from the hefker at any time. The Chacham came along and said, Tikkun Rabbanan to have a hefker. The Rabbanan said, no, you can't back out anymore. It's hefker. Now, if it really is hefker, if it's hefker according to Rabbanan, if it's according to Rabbanan, it would be potter from Maestris. But my Ikra Din, it's chayv in Maestris, right? because Mikra din is not hefker. Ubevadai shechayvu b'maiser. The Rabbanon aren't going to make it hefker to the point that they'll tell him he doesn't have to give maisers. Kiva midaraisa lo have a hefker. The Baal midaraisa, Rabbi Yosy's hefker is not hefker at all. You chayv maisers. The Rabbanon aren't going to come and be makel with you and say you don't have to give maisers. Then he show you choylem lepotray. We should hefker best hefker. They technically have the ability to pattern for maisers even midaraisa because they can use the power of hefker best hefker to make a real hefker. And if he takes it, it's taka being coined from hefker. They could do that, but they don't do such things. The lifter min meiser mashu chay by minatoyer. If minatoyer, you're mechuyev in meiser for this, because according to Rabbi Yosy, the hefker that you made, which is completely revocable, you could completely be chayzer, it remained in your shush, will be mechuyev in meiser. The Rabbanon, even though they're making the konos, they're not going to pater you from your chiv deraisa the meiser. The chivin shekain. So now we have a weird situation because b'deraisa you're mechuyev in meiser, but if you look at post Rabbanon takon, it seems that it's hefker.
Point is right. Actually, knows that the Rabbanon is the
But we'll see. The Chibin Shekain, we'll see what he thinks. The Ran's going to explain to us what his psyche is. The Chibin Shekain, Ikal Mechas, we need to be concerned. Dilma Osi le'Isurei le'Isurei minachiv alaptur. He might still be mixing wheat or grain that's mechuyev and trumas and ma'asos midaraisa with those that aren't. Why? The Amar Zoy this guy is going to say, the guy who took it, Vadai, Kivon shezachuni chachamim b'masher v'sachisi. Since the chacham allow me to keep what I've taken, so it seems like we're speaking not like what I said a minute ago about the guy taking it himself. It's talking about a third party. If a third party takes it, he's going to say, since the chacham say I can have it, hefker gomer. It must be hefker gomer. The chazara de'idach, and even though the person who was mafker it backed out, midina will have a clue. I'm going to think that the Rabbanon is what the Rabbanon did is really the way it is. Meaning that if I am koined from this fellow's hefker, even though this guy was chayzer, and technically it's not hefker anymore, I'm going to consider it like I was zoicha it from hefker, right? Because the Rabbanon said I can keep it even though he was chayzer. If the Rabbanon said I can keep it even though he was chayzer, in my mind that means it was really hefker. So why am I chayiv in meiser? They're being mechayiv me with meiser now. Why? So let's think about it. When a third party takes it, according to Yosy, the third party didn't get it from hefker. The third party got it because the Rabbanon took it away from me and gave it to him. Because technically it was not hefker. I was chayzer. So the Rabbanon took something away from me and gave it to the fellow who took it from me. That's not hefker. It never went through a stage of hefker. In reality, it's chayiv and meisers. But he's going to think that I got it from hefker because the fact that I can keep it must mean that it was hefker. So the person taking it from this guy who was mafker, he perceives that he's getting it from hefker, and he's part of him meisers. And but in reality, he's chayiv and meisers with the reisa because the Rabbanon took it away from the mafker and gave it to the person who got it. But the Rabbanon said you should still give meiser. So when I get it, the Rabbanon told me to be mavish trumas and meisers, but the meiser was hefker. So I'm assuming the Rabbanon are only telling me to do it with the Rabbanon. So I think that I have tvua that's mechuyev in trumas and meisers with the Rabbanon, when in fact I have tvua that's mechuyev in trumas and meisers with the reisa. That's a massive problem because I might now use this to be matir other tvua that's only chayiv with the Rabbanon. Really, I have to use this to be matter other tvua that's chayiv with the reisa because you can't mix the reisa and the Rabbanon. And that's what our problem is. So, and for the Gemara, to solve that problem, we'll say that anybody who's koine from this hefker, kima asris aser mineubei. You're not allowed to use this produce if, because of the koine Rabbanon, where they said that after 3 days, even according to Rabbi Yosy, it becomes irrevocable. If you get it because of that, make sure to be mafresh trumas ma'aser mineubei. Don't use this with any in conjunction with any other wheat, and that avoids all problems.
We're assuming that he knows that the Rabbanon is not included.
That's right. The Ran says his understanding is his perception of the situation is that he got it from hefker, and even though the Rabbanon are telling him to be mavish shumas and meisers, it must be a chumar Rabbanon. That's his perception.
And
So the Rabbanon have to head off his perceptions.
that's only the balabus or the other
It's
guy?
it's talking specifically about the other guy. So that's where I was wrong. I was talking earlier about the balabus, but that's completely wrong. It's the fellow taking it. His perception is is that he's only mechuyev with the Rabbanan because he thinks he's getting it from Hefker, and that the Rabbanan are telling him to be Mamash Shumas or Meisers are a chimur the Rabbanan. When in fact, since the Chacham just took it from the Mafker and gave it to the guy who found it, clearly that's mechuyev in Shumas or Meisers with the Raisa. So that's it. Now we have two ways to learn the Brisa. The Brisa can either be from beginning to end, following the Shita of the Rabbanan, or it can be from beginning to end, following the Shita of Yosy. And depending on if you hold the default is that a hefker is automatically irrevocable, that would dictate what the Chachamim came in to fix. If you held that the hefker normally is irrevocable, then the 3 days that the Chachamim put into place was to make it revocable for 3 days. According to Rabban, they pushed off that for 3 days. According to Rabbi Yosy, where it's always you can be chayzer, their takana came after the 3 days to make it that you can't be chayzer anymore. So 3 days is consistent no matter who you learn like. But the question is, during the 3 days, are they making it? During the first 3 days, are they making it revocable according to the Rabbanan, or after 3 days they're making it irrevocable according to Rabbi Yosy? But it's all about the 3 days. Okay, so that takes us through yesterday's Gemara. I think it's a lot easier by us walking through the Brisa step by step than it was reading the Ram. So I hope to now is more clarity in Rabbi Yosy and in the Rabban.
The Einzach of the Ram said that they didn't make that at Kula because they wanted to save the Hilchas Hefker to show about some that's why they would think that because
We're a little bit fuzzy. We're all over the place. Are we talking according to Rabbanan now, or talking about Rabbi Yosy? We have to pick a specific shita and go through with clarity. So we can pick the Rabbanan and we can pick Rabbi Yosy, because otherwise it gets confusing. Okay, so let's see the next Gemara. Meisvei. Now we're going to have another kasha, because in our new life for Rabbi Yosy, he's still standing, because we can learn the whole brisa either way. So now let's try the next brisa. Meisvei, the third line on Daf Mem Daled Amud Beis. Hamafker is Carmel. So yesterday he was Mafker's field. Today he was Mafker's Karen. Ula Shachar Amud Uvachu. The very next morning, he didn't wait 3 days. The very next morning he started harvesting his field. Chayiv beperet uvaolos uvashikhu bepeah. He's mechuyev in all of the different matanos anim that you have to give. Shikha peah, we know those are peret and oilus are if the grapes are too small, right? If they don't hang over, it's not a cluster, right? So you mechuyev to leave all those things over. It's hefker. So why is he chayiv? We put him in a meiser, but he's put him in a meiser. Why? Because it's hefker. So this is a little bit difficult to understand. What's the difference? So the Ran speaks out. I'm sorry.
He himself.
Yeah, but once it was hefker, it's potter. Once something was hefker, it will be potter.
First 3 days.
Oh, so you're telling me if it's the first 3 days? So if it's the first 3 days, why is he potter of a meiser? Should be chayv a meiser. Oh, so the problem is, according to the Rabbanon, that hefker is a real hefker. How could you say you're potter of a meiser? How could you say you're potter of a meiser during the first 3 days? Hefker is not a good hefker. That's your kasha. That's exactly the Gemara's kasha. Bishlama leula the Rabbanon katanila. Bishlama according to Ula, you could say that we're going according to the Rabbanon, and according to the Rabbanon, even though midairaisa it's hefker and he's potter of a meiser, midairabanan he's mechuyev because of that 3 day delay. Oh, and that's exactly what Gemara says. Udaraisa katanila. Maybe this brisa isn't talking about Allah Halamaisa. Maybe this brisa is speaking about midairaisa. He would be potter of a meiser, but midarabanan he's not. So it's not so geshmak to say that the brisa is not Allah Halamaisa, but at least you can say the brisa is talking about the din dairaisa. But then you might ask. Let me just finish. So then you might ask if it's potter min a meiser because the din dairaisa says that it's hefker. So why am I chayiv on parent oil shikha peah? So for that the Ran says because there's a special pasuk that says that even if it's hefker, if you still go use it, you have to give it anyway. There's a special pasuk, and let's have a look at the third to the last line before it gets super wide. Meisvei amafker is karmel l'shachar amnu boter chayiv peret of shikha peah. Mishum the avagav the hefker potter mikulu. It's hefker. So what's the difference between all these items that you're chayiv on and meiser that you're potter on? Uchadarim ba'alma nishman lemud hefker afilu hachim mishum the kulu hani. By all of these mitzvahs of lekrat, shikha, peah, peret, oilos, ksiv tazov yisera. There's an extra word la'ani v'lager tazov v'isam. So besides telling you have to give it, there's an extra word tazov which tells you Mechayvu kol heicha shehichsek bu v'hu atzmai. Even if you're a mafkir, if you went and took it back, you're still mechuyev in matnas aniyim. By Meiser, it doesn't say that. So therefore, by Meiser, you're potter midaraisa. But as Mati pointed out, the Rabbanan put 3-day delay, so you're going to be potter. You're going to be in fact chayiv midarabanan because it's not really hefker. So that's the question. Bishlam alula, the Rabbanan katanila, or the Raisa katanila. Ela Reish Lakish. But if you want to learn this brisa, should be consistent with Rabbi Yosy. Am I potter min a Meiser? Why in heaven's name should it be potter from Meiser? According to Rabbi Yosy, it's not hefker. It's mamish not hefker the first 2 days, right? So even midaraisa, it's chayiv in Meiser. The first 3 days, midaraisa, it's not hefker. So I'm chuyiv Meiser midaraisa. So how could it say potter min a Meiser? According to the Rabban, you can say, yeah, it means midaraisa. But according to Rabbi Yosy, you can't say it means midaraisa. Amar Lach, so that's not shver on a shlokish. I never said this price is going to go to Rabbi Yosy. I said that price is going to go to Rabbi Yosy. This price is going to go to Rabbanan. Amar Lach, ki amri another Rabbi Yosy, ki amri another Rabbi Yosy. Yeah, in the last price, I told you the whole Torah to make it fit like Rabbi Yosy. Over here, I can. Over here, it must be going according to Rabbanan. How Rabbanan?
1 second, according to the Rabbanan,
Midaraisa, it's a real hefker. Midaraisa and potter from Meiser. But Midrabanan, they said no. For 3 days, it's not hefker, and therefore you're going to be chayiv.
The Rabbanan said, Loki, the Rabbanan, this bride is talking in Hilchim Terai.
That's correct. That's correct. That's correct. So just because they're the Rabbanan, it doesn't mean they can't learn the case of Deraisa. The Rabbanan learn Deraisa. Okay, that's one shot. Iboy Sema, and this is the side of today's Gemara, is ha the afkare ba'anfei trend. It all depends on how many people were standing in front of you when you made it hefker. If you only were mafrit in front of 2 people, this whole major chiddush that we talked about, that it's not a full hefker, it stays in your reshus until someone takes it away. This whole chiddush in your Yosy, that's not by all hefker. We thought it was not by all hefker. It's only if the hefker that you made in front of 2 people. The had afker babet losa. But if you were mafrit in front of 3 people, even your Yosy holds, it immediately removes it from your reshus. Why should there be a difference? Zokt, Duran, and all the Rishonim, they say very simply, if I'm being mafkir something, I want to have it, so why am I doing it in private for? So when I'm mafkir something, either in front of 1 person or in front of 2 people, it's because I want to give it to one of those 2 people. And I want the other one to be innate. That's really what it is. So yes, technically it's hefker, but it's hefker that's really like a matana, because clearly I want to give it to one of you 2 people. Since the hefker is done in such a way where I want it earmarked to belong to 1 or 2 people, that is, we treat that hefker that it remains in your reshus until he takes it away. But if I was mafkir in front of 3 people, then the word gets out. Then I was mafkir for everybody. So when you do it in front of 3 people, clearly you have in mind that you're being mafkir for everybody. So therefore it leaves your reshus immediately. But when you're mafkir only in front of 1 or 2 people, that shows that you don't really want it to go to anybody. You want it to go to one of those 2 people. And therefore, in the brisa of Sodav yesterday, it's speaking where you're mafkir only in front of 2 people. So it's not really hefker. So there you needed all the massaging to make the brisa work that way. But in this brisa, it's regular hefker. So therefore, it would stem perfectly with the brisa. I'm sorry? Because clearly I only wanted it to go to a very limited group of people. Because it's a different type of hefker. I did say hefker, I didn't say matana, but it's a different type of hefker. It's hefker where I want earmark to go to somebody. And the Rishonim talk about there's a lacha. What if you were mafker something only lanim v'loy lashir? There's a discussion if that's considered hefker. The mecholik b'shamei b'sil if that's considered hefker, right? So it leads into a whole different shaila, but we have a time limit. The Amr Rabbi Yochanan Mishum Rabbi Shimon ben Yotzadek kol mafker b'fnei shloisha have a hefker b'fnei shnaim lo have a hefker. That's what Rabbi Shimon ben Yotzadek. That's what Rabbi Yochanan said in the name of Rabbi Shimon ben Yotzadek. Now there are those who want to learn that this Rabbi Yochanan is explaining the sheet of Rabbi Yosy. The problem that Rishonim have with this is it seems to say b'fnei shnaim lo have a hefker. Our Rabbi Yosy holds b'fnei shnaim it's also hefker, but it doesn't leave your shus until someone takes it. So that's part of what the tumult of the Rishonim is this. How could Rabbi Yochanan himself learned Rabbi Yosy differently? So there are those who say one's Rabbi Yochanan saying it in his own name, and one is Rabbi Yochanan saying it in his Rebbe's name. We have that a lot of times because it's possible these 2 members don't stem. So either you have to massage this And when we say lo have hefker, it doesn't mean it's mamash not hefker. It means it doesn't leave it rishus right away, but it really is hefker. That's what Samar is trying to learn. Samar is trying to learn that it says what it means, what it says. Lo have hefker is not hefker at all, and therefore it's inconsistent with how Rabbi Yochanan earlier learned Pshat and Rabbi Yosy. Rabbi Shimon Levi Amar, Dvar Torah afilu be'echad have a hefker, even if only one person is there, it's hefker. Umatam amar b'shloisha. So why b'chlal is there such an inyan to have three people? Kedei she'echad zoich l'shnai me'idim. So that you have one person being zoich and there's two edim to verify what happened. And there's a whole shaila. If you say that it's, so do you say that if there's only one person there, it's not hefker, or do you say it is hefker? There's a shaila about that as well, and it's very much negei l'maisa to halacha l'maisa. Where's the negei halacha l'maisa? What if you lent out your animal to a goy, and your animal is not allowed to do work on Shabbos? A person with solar shis v'emtoi, but the problem is you're concerned that he's going to use it, and you don't have a way of getting it back. So you're allowed to be mafker the animal, even if no one's around, and that will protect you from violating Shabbos. So I just want to learn the last couple of lines of the round.
Something happened that day, that we got charged.
Yeah, that's right. V'hach sugya kula, if you tell. V'hach sugya kula, lemai desolka daite meikara. This whole sugya, this complicated Gemara that we just learned, is only based on a havamina that's not even true. The time of Rabbi Yosy mishum dekasaver hefker kabatan nasa. Rabbi Yochanan davar hachi loyel ha'toisen. But really, Rabbi Yochanan was slugged up already. So all this lumdus that we did now was for naught. The chivin shekain l'maskana deloil at chila kalach sugya. The last blot that we learned is totally irrelevant because that whole sheet doesn't exist. We naktina only perusha the brisa that something doesn't become something that's hefker remains in your rishus until the third party comes along and takes it. That's gone. We slugged it up, right? So the naktina perusha the brisa. So how are we going to learn pshat in the brisa? The mafker sadeyu. It's going to be like ula the chula rabbanani. It's going to go according to ula. That in the reisha it's irrevocable right away, except that the color pushes off for 3 days. And in the Sefer, since it's a weird type of hefker, there we say it remains in your source. Rabbi Yosy agrees to the Rabbanan in this case, because Rabbi Yosy's whole thing was only a kana, a gzeira of a guy not really being mafked properly. Rabbi Yosy will allowed the Rabbanan, but in the hefker klal. According to the way we understand Rabbi Yosy Maskana, that it's only the gzeira of Beis Musan, whatever it's called. He holds as far as how hefker works, it works exactly like the Rabbanan says. By the time of the Sefer, the Getani the Achaloi Zachaba, Beinu Beinacha Yochal Achzaboy, from the Kibun the Shavu of Shana Leshchichan, going back to Mati's power before, like Navik Mishus Mafker Adosim Mishus Zoicha, the Chulak and the Precious Leo. So we're following the Pshat as if the whole brisa is going according to the Rabbanan, because there is no other Shita. Well, in Halacha, the Pluktayu, Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Shimon Levi, Nakidik Rabbi Shimon Levi, the Amar Dvar Torah Afidu Be'echad have a heifer. Even if you make heifer to one person, and there's only one person there, it works. Why did they say you should have 3 people when you make something heifer? It's not heifer, but we all it is, and that's why if you look over here in the Tosfos, he speaks out beferish that if you have an animal that's by somebody else, you could be mafkir. And referring to what I said earlier, I want to highlight why I learned Sadeyu means Dafka Sadeyu, because he says over here, the Dafka Bekarkoyis who the Shaykh Ramos, Avabatalton, Avahefker Alter, Afilu Bifnei Shnayim. So they only made the Takana to push off for 3 days your Hefker is only if it's about Karka, but not if it's about Matalton. So I guess if you're Mafker, the parish itself, maybe they would do Shash Ramoyis. I'm not sure why not.
That their halucha, the gedrake is only by pirates, because the whole corner is that you should.
So what he said does not stem with the words that are.
So my student that I'm not going to feel. I'm not going to pirates of the field because of the halucha of.
Could be, but that's not. But that's also a massage. Okay. So let's. So let me just hop it on 3 lines so that at least we can feel good that we finished. The new pair. Hashutim shenodru. I'm sorry. Oh, kavalti. Hashutim shenodru anoz hamizeh. There are 2 shutim that are really getting along well, and they answered each other to have enough of each other. So they share a field. And now, how could we each go into the field? I might be in your part. So the loch is asur in the chatzar. If they own a chatzar b'shutfis, neither of us can walk in because I'm infringing on hana that I'm having from you that I'm not allowed to have. Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov Omer, no. Zen nichnas l'soich shaloi, v'zen nichnas l'soich shaloi. Each person, when they go in, we're going to say they're going into their own chelik. Now you see, there's a long run here. He brings up two shilas. There's one shot in Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov that the reason why it's Zed Nichlas Shaloi, Zed Nichlas Shaloi is because he holds of Yesh Breira. When we originally bought the field, it was established that whenever I'll be in the field, it'll be mine. And whenever you'll be in the field, it'll be yours. So Zok Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, there's no problem here because I'm never infringing on you. When I'm here now, it's a glory mill, so this is mine. This is my part that I'm entitled to for the shuttas. And when you're there, it shows that you're entitled to the shuttas. And the Chachamim don't hold the Breira. That's one shot of how to learn this Mishnah. But the problem with that, the Ram asks, is we pass in halacha l'maisa ein breira. For the Raisa, it's ein breira. So if you pass ein breira, how does that fit with this? And halacha l'maisa, we pass like Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov. So zen nichnas l'soich shaloi, zen nichnas l'soich shaloi. So then that's what the whole tumult of the Ram is. Could you say there's different type of breira? Maybe this breira is not as bad as that breira, which I don't want to get into today. We'll get into tomorrow because it's late. But I'm just going to bring up the simplest alternative shot that the Ram brings down is the reason why Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov holds Zen Nichlas Shaloi has nothing to do with prayer. You know what it's because of? It's because he holds. What's the problem with going into somebody's field? It's Viter Aser B'Mudar Hana. Because something stepping in my field, nobody really cares about it, right? But we've been following the shita of Viter Aser B'Mudar Hana. Even something that people don't care about. If you're also to have enough from somebody, you're not even allowed to take that from him. Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov holds Viter is not Aser B'Mudar Hana. So Zen Nichlas Shaloi, because Vita is mutter. So even though we were passing like Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, not because of Breira, really ain't Breira. So how could I walk in? I walk in because that small no that I'm having just from being in your field, that's not a good enough of an cause of this.
It's a game changer in town.
Indeed, it's a good show everywhere. That's right. Because we'll stop here and mention we'll pick up the rest of the beginning of a shutfim tomorrow.
7:30.
Tomorrow is Shabbos. Right, so tomorrow we're going to learn an hour before Mincha, and we're going to learn 7:30 at night. I'm not sure. I also want to bring up Shabbos Chanukah. A lot of people are busy Motzei Shabbos. So Motzei Shabbos, I'm going to want to learn, let's say maybe a half hour after the Zman, so that we can get home, because still we're all going to have our kids over. I'm saying we're all going to have our kids over because my wife told me that's what's going to happen. So Motzei, and the problem is we also have to have time to light menorah and come back. So we'll have to figure out a time that gives us all enough time to light menorah and come back, but to be able to start earlier so that we can finish. I'm sorry? Will I be in Toronto? Oh, you don't tell anybody. I'll never be able to marry my kids. Oy vey.